Welcome to the first installment of Hone's new interview series, focusing on the challenges and opportunities facing HR and talent leaders today. With all that's going on in the world disrupting business as usual, I was thrilled to be joined by Merritt Anderson, former global head of HR at GitHub and now a people and culture consultant. Merritt shares some really practical tips that everyone can use to make your organization more fair and inclusive. Check it out. What are you seeing people do, or how are you seeing people respond to this important conversation that we're having as a country and as a world?
When I was at GitHub, there were a few companies that were really leading the way on having that DE&I conversation, right? Starting with, holding themselves accountable to representation numbers and diversity reporting. And, that was probably like 5 or 6 years ago when that was really starting. And no one really wanted to take the full leap into the fact that the underpinning of all of this was kind of this inherent systemic racism, where we would talk about the reports and we would say what we were trying to do to increase the pipeline. But the conversations now are much deeper around how do companies show up as stewards of kind of this social movement, right? Before, it's like companies didn't really want to take that step. Like, we're not a social justice company, we're a product driven company, we're a SaaS company, we're this or that, right? We're a cloud-based company. And now it's kind of like we've seen the merging of the power that comes with having this corporate responsibility and this presence in the world, and how we can use our voice to amplify those of others. And where I think there was a fear in the past to take that cannonball into the deep end, it's so visible, it's so apparent. And I think we're now trying to figure out, how do you do that? How do we have these conversations? Because it's beyond the scratch the surface of 2 years ago, of 3 years ago, of 4 years ago. Employees are demanding more, companies are wanting to do more. And this kind of performative narratives or programs that are being put in place, we can see now that that didn't work. And so how can we lead the way from the workplace perspective to really kind of demand equality and justice in the workplace?
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think you're right when you say the past few years have had it as a topic, but it's been surrounded by the fear of going too far, or getting into that conversation, especially publicly. And I think with recent events, the fear has shifted to the other side, which is, we're afraid of not going far enough, or not doing enough, or not handling this proactively in the right way. So what are some of the kind of practical things, or just the baseline that we should expect from every company, given how times have changed in this area?
I don't know what I would expect from every company. I know my experience, and I think where I'm advising companies now is to not do those performative things, to not have, white privilege come out, where it's kind of like we're trying to do the great white hope and the salvation. It's really around having those voices at the table and having the dialogue with all employees and people at levels of the company to talk about how this must be a grassroots effort that's obviously supported, modeled, committed to by leadership. But I'm really resisting this whole feeling right now, where companies that were kind of late to the conversation are like, all right, we're looking for unconscious bias training. Okay, we want to hire a head of D&I now. It's like, no, slow down. I'm very much grassroots, like bottoms up. Like, let's talk to the folks and say, what is it that you all want? What's going to be meaningful? How do we create growth tracks? How do we get beyond just representation? How do we hold ourselves accountable to demonstrable metrics, be it promotion metrics or hiring metrics, or making sure that our language is inclusive in our job descriptions and our job postings and our performance management system, that it's an equitable process, right? That there's equal opportunity for growth and leadership within each company. What are those levers? And ultimately, like, how do you build in a lens of inclusion and equity within your products? And how are we demanding that of the customers that we work with, right? And so these are the type of things that I think are lasting. These are the things that are going to effectuate long-term change, versus some of the more performative of like hiring in a D&I leader, doing inclusion training, it's got to be across all facets of the business, and it's got to be a shared responsibility and desire and commitment across all levels of the business, right? How are you demonstrating inclusivity and being clear specifically around what that looks like? It doesn't necessarily mean, oh, hey, I've got, I'm pairing up with a Latinx coworker. It's more, I'm showing up to meetings and I'm making space at the table for all of the voices. I am lifting up voices, that aren't in the room. I'm constantly looking at, through a lens of inclusion when I'm coding or, when I'm pairing with people. So I think that that's really, really critical. And I think, integrating a lot of these things into just the ethos of your company, and that you're communicating it all the time.